There is a moment, maybe you've had it, when you're sitting alone on a Friday night. No plans, no calls, no notifications, and a quiet voice in your head asks, "Is something wrong with me?" You scroll past photos of other people's dinners, other people's laughter, other people's squad goals, and the silence in your own room suddenly feels loud. But here's the question almost nobody asks. What if that silence isn't a problem to solve? What if it's a skill you never learned to use? Today we're going to unlearn one of the most damaging assumptions of modern life, that being alone and being lonely are the same thing. They are not. And the difference between them might be the single most important psychological skill of the next decade. From the time we're children, we're trained to treat solitude as punishment. Time out means alone in a room. Being picked last means alone on the field. Eating lunch by yourself means something has gone wrong with you, socially. So by adulthood, most of us have quietly absorbed a rule we never consciously chose. Alone equals rejected. Alone equals unwanted. Alone equals less than. This is why so many people fill every gap in their day with noise. A podcast in the car, a show playing in the background while cooking, a phone in hand at every red light. Silence has become something to survive, not something to inhabit. But psychologists studying solitude have found something the culture got backwards. Solitude isn't the absence of connection. It's a specific psychological state. And like any state, it can be entered skillfully or clumsily. Loneliness and solitude look identical from the outside. Same empty room, same quiet evening. But internally, they are opposite experiences. Loneliness is a mismatch, a gap between the connection you want and the connection you actually have. It's involuntary. It's marked by craving, restlessness, a sense of being cut off from something you need. Solitude, on the other hand, is chosen. It's not the absence of people, it's the presence of yourself. Research grounded in self-determination theory, the framework built around autonomy, competence, and connection, shows that people who feel their alone time is a choice, rather than an exile, report significantly higher well-being than people who feel it was forced on them. In other words, it's not the hours spent alone that damage us. It's the meaning we assign to those hours. Two people can sit in the exact same quiet apartment on the exact same Friday night. One feels abandoned. The other feels recharged. The difference isn't the circumstance, it's the interpretation. So what separates the person who dreads solitude from the person who's genuinely energized by it? Psychologists point to something called solitude skills, an internal capacity to self-soothe, self-direct, and self-entertain without outsourcing your emotional state to another person. People who never build this capacity often use company as a distraction from an uncomfortable inner world. The moment the noise stops, whatever they've been avoiding, anxiety, grief, boredom, an unresolved thought, rushes back in, and they mistake that discomfort for loneliness itself. But people who are genuinely happy alone haven't eliminated that discomfort. They've built a relationship with it. They've learned that boredom passes, that an anxious thought is not an emergency, that their own company is survivable, and, eventually, enjoyable. There's a personality piece here, too. Introverts tend to find solitude naturally replenishing, because even pleasant social interaction consumes cognitive resources for them. But this isn't only an introvert's advantage. Highly extroverted people can train solitude skills the same way anyone trains a muscle they've neglected. It's a capacity, not a fixed trait. Here's a detail that surprises most people the first time they hear it. In one well-known study on solitude, participants were asked to sit alone in a bare room for 15 minutes with nothing to do but think. No phone, no book, nothing. The only other option available to them was a device that delivered a mild electric shock. A striking number of people, including many who had said beforehand that they would pay to avoid being shocked, chose to shock themselves rather than sit with their own thoughts. That finding tells us something uncomfortable. For a lot of people, an unpleasant sensation feels more tolerable than an unoccupied mind. Not because solitude itself is dangerous, but because most of us were never taught how to be inside it. We were never given the skill, so the moment it's required, we panic and reach for anything else, even pain, to escape it. This is the real starting point of the conversation. Being happy alone isn't a personality trait some people are lucky enough to be born with. It's closer to a muscle that atrophies from disuse in a culture engineered to keep it constantly distracted. It's worth naming what's lost when someone never learns to be alone. Constant company can quietly become a form of avoidance, a way of never sitting with your own thoughts long enough to hear what they're actually saying. People who cannot tolerate solitude often make decisions from a kind of low-grade panic, staying in relationships that don't fit them, saying yes to plans they don't want, building an identity out of other people's opinions because they've never had the quiet required to form opinions of their own. Solitude, uncomfortable as it is at first, is often where self-knowledge actually happens. You cannot hear your own values over the noise of constant company. You cannot recognize your own patterns if you're never still long enough to notice them repeating. The good news is that solitude, like any skill, responds to practice. A few shifts make the difference. First, reframe the time. Instead of asking, "Why am I alone tonight?" ask, "What do I actually want to do with this time?" The first question implies a deficit. The second implies ownership. Second, start small. You don't need to enjoy a solo weekend trip on your first attempt. Start with one solo meal, one walk without your phone, 10 minutes of sitting with your own thoughts before you reach for a distraction. Third, separate the discomfort from the diagnosis. When restlessness shows up in the first few minutes of silence, that isn't proof you're lonely. It's often just your nervous system adjusting after constant stimulation. Sit with it for 5 more minutes before deciding what it means. Finally, build a life, not just a schedule. People who are happy alone usually have something their solitude serves. A project, a craft, a curiosity, a body of knowledge they're slowly building. Solitude feels empty when it has no direction. It feels rich when it has a purpose. Being alone was never supposed to be the tragedy we were taught it was. Somewhere between childhood timeouts and adult FOMO, we lost the ability to tell the difference between a room that's empty of people and a life that's empty of meaning. They are not the same thing. The people who seem most at peace in this world are rarely the ones surrounded by the most company. They're the ones who no longer need company to feel whole, who can walk into a quiet room and feel, instead of fear, something closer to relief. You don't need to become a hermit to feel this. You just need to stop treating your own presence as a consolation prize. Learn to sit with yourself, and you'll find something most people never do, that the person you're least afraid to be alone with is you. There's one more thing worth saying before we close. Choosing solitude doesn't mean rejecting connection. The two aren't opposites, and this isn't an argument for isolating yourself from people who matter. The healthiest version of the skill is someone who can genuinely enjoy a room full of friends on Saturday and genuinely enjoy an empty apartment on Sunday without one canceling out the other. The goal was never to need people less. It was to stop needing them to escape yourself. If this changed the way you see solitude, subscribe. Because next week, we go deeper into the psychology of the one mind you carry with you everywhere, your own.